First, I'd like to welcome all of our attendees to the Windshire Group's Ask the Expert series, How to Leverage the Digital Revolution in Early Stage Companies, with our special guest from the Court Square Group. My name is Jen Bardsley, and I'll be serving as your moderator for today's webinar. I currently serve as the account manager slash operations manager for the Windshire Group. So I would like to note that the views expressed in this webinar are those of the panelists. It's for informational purposes only. It's not intended as legal or regulatory advice. And to introduce our panelists, we have Dr. James Blackwell, who's president and principal consultant for the Windshire Group, which was founded in 2011. The Windshire Group accelerates development and manufacturing for commercializing therapies and provides quality expertise. Dr. Blackwell has been a leading industry consultant for more than 15 years. And we also have Keith Parent, who is a founder and CEO of Court Square Group. He leads the company and the vision for using IT as a strategic enabler for life science companies from preclinical all the way to manufacturing.
The webinar today really is the marriage of the user requirements for small companies and the marriage of that and the IT structure and organization of the company. It's a very important factor. And why is this important? This is very important for small companies because it's important for them to improve their operational efficiency. People spend less time looking for stuff, and it speeds up your business processes. And you want to facilitate decision making. You want to be able to access the most current and correct information, and it increases organizational value. A disorganized information with their information all over the place can kill a deal. We've seen that happen. Due diligence and data rooms need to be well designed and populated with good information to facilitate deal making. So that can be very important to small companies. And you're creating very valuable information. And this will be important later for your regulatory filings and for compliance needs, and for your technical people who want to access and understand the history in terms of what's happening within the organization. So this helps you avoid compliance issues later, patient privacy laws, health authority issues, or potentially even SEC violations. And also it creates a more satisfied workforce. Studies have shown people are happier when they're dealing with environments that are well organized and they're able to work efficiently. Nobody wants to be in a cumbersome, inefficient, time-wasting environment.
Let's see, it seems that it seems that everything is moving to the cloud. We are concerned about the security of our data. How can we build a secure and compliant IT environment with a limited IT staff?
So I think that the thing is, can you control the environment? So I think, James, to that point, I think there's lots of things that we do from a perspective of working with hybrid environments, cloud environments, on-premise environments, and some of the things that we think about are public versus private clouds, how we deal with those. Anything can be as secure as you want it or not secure. Just because somebody puts something in the cloud doesn't mean that that cloud vendor is going to be managing it the way you expect them to manage it, because you don't even know what they're doing behind the scenes. For the most part, they're running something. When people log on into an Office 365 environment and they set things up, they get access to email, all of a sudden things are there, but they haven't configured things. They haven't looked at how they're tying their data together. And all of that has to be managed. So you really should work with somebody who understands how to pull that stuff together and how you deal with that. I think from our perspective, we want to look at what are you putting in the cloud? How many different clouds are you working with? Is it a public cloud versus a private cloud? Do you have control over that? How are you tying these things together? How is the data being transferred between? One of the big things people don't realize is that when you transfer data between one system to another, are you looking at how that data is getting transferred? Is it the same data that was sent from one to another? So those are big aspects that we always think about dealing with that, particularly when it's in a multi-cloud environment or multiple vendors on different clouds. James, how about you on your end?
Yeah, I mean, I agree completely. And what we've spoken to earlier in the webinar is the fact that you need to understand your risks once you start going down the road of using these types of services. I mean, just as an example, it wasn't our industry, but it was in the news recently. The software as a service company that was helping homeowners control their things in their home from the Internet of Things type of perspective. They went out of business and people were blocked out of stuff in their own home. So there's a business risk beyond a compliance risk that needs to be understood and appreciated. So there are ways to control that. Again, we encourage our clients, including our small ones, to start to take those things into consideration before they start going too far out on that branch and understand those risks.
You know, I think one of the big things that when we look at public clouds versus private cloud environments, one of it is what your role is in change control. Do you have an active role in that change control, or is change happening outside of your control? With that being the case, we have to deal a lot with large companies like a Microsoft or an AWS or a Google. When you say, well, what's the big deal with change control? Well, what happens if you have an application that's up and running and all of a sudden that vendor, whether it's AWS or Microsoft, they look at their environment and they're dealing with they're not only dealing with the life science world, they're dealing with all of these other people around the world, and they've got to put out a patch or they've got to put out some change out there. They're dealing with a much larger constituency than you are. So what happens is they're putting it out there. It's up to us as a vendor working with that cloud environment to say, is that change going to affect what we've got? We have ways that we look at whether it's change records, all those things ahead of time. We look and test before we do things in the public cloud, in the production environment, and we're making sure that it's not affecting us, or we make sure we have enough time to say, hey, when this change comes through, it's going to affect it in this way. We need to fix it ahead of time. So most people running applications don't think that way. So we have to think that way, and your vendors should think that way as well. So if you've got a vendor out there and they're not thinking that way, it's your job to push them to say, hey, what are you doing around these changes that are out there? You know, I'm sure that there's lots of different horror stories, just as James talked about, you know, not being able to get into your own garage or getting into your house with IoT. I'm sure there's lots of people that this thing worked yesterday. Why isn't it working today? And you'll find out that something updated on my laptop, or somebody put a new version of a piece of software out there. Everybody at some point has been hit by that, or they've got a new version of their browser and all of a sudden things stopped working. Those are things that we have to take into account on a very regular basis. And it's very important in a regulated environment that you're thinking about those things, or somebody is thinking about that. So that's where that risk is coming in, and that's where we're trying to mitigate that risk for the computing base.
Keith, it's absolutely a big problem, especially for larger pharmaceutical companies right now. They're dealing with, you know, their cloud services changing things, as you mentioned, and then they have to go back, and they now have huge amounts of data in those systems, and they have to go back and revalidate things. But there are ways, even for small companies, to think strategically and try to avoid those problems even now or later, or at least understand those risks and what Keith is talking about. Again, my message is it's not difficult. Just get the people who know what they're doing to help you if you don't have those resources internally.
You know, and I think, James, one of the items that we have on here is configuration versus customization is really important to note. But so you want to make sure that when you're looking at systems, particularly if they're going to be in a cloud, that they are configurable. And you've tested around that configuration, because what happens is some people say, well, we don't do it that way. We want to do it this way. So you customize things and you change things for the way you want to run the company. What happens is the more likely you are to use something that's configuration, the more likely you are to deal with any changes that the application can handle. If you customize, what happens is inevitably you may set yourself up for more work in the long run. We've got a partner that we work with that's got an application that's built in you know, one of the major cloud vendors. They put a lot of effort into their automating their scripting. So every time the vendor puts a change out there, they can automatically run their scripts, and it doesn't take them any time to do that. However, many of their customers who are using it in production environments, they've customized it for the way they want to run their business. Well, now what happens is every 2 months, they've got to look at revalidating some of their stuff or running their scripts over again. The vendor of the software, they're geared up to do that. Most customers aren't geared up to do that, and they don't want to do that. They want to run their business. So our goal is to help them to look at how do we set those up so you have the least impact when these changes do happen.